Hey everyone, Ryan Bolton here. I am a mortgage nerd. I'm with Patriot Home Mortgage, and I want to talk about the Harris proposal for the housing industry. There's a lot of talk about the $25,000 grant or down payment assistance program, and there's some good things in her proposal, but there's also some bad things. So I want to review both of those. But let's start with the good. So let's talk about the good in the proposal. The first thing I wanted to address is everyone's talking about the $25,000 down payment assistance grant or assistance that is part of this program. 25,000 is a lot. I mean, that's a big down payment chunk. And they're basically saying that's because the home prices have gone up so much that that's why they have to raise it. If you remember in 2008, there were some tax credits of, I think it was 8,000 at that time to kind of spur people to buy it up. But the reason that was different is there was a lot more supply. We were still adding new homes. Builders were still building homes, but then you had this wave of existing foreclosures and people that were upside down, and a lot of existing homes started hitting the market like crazy as well. We're not seeing that over the last few years, where a lot of the existing homes aren't going up on the market. One, it's because they can't replace their interest rate. They've got a lower interest rate than today's market, and usually it's a pretty significant increase, and they can't replace the price. They may only owe 300,000 on their house, and to replace the same house, they might have to jump to 5 or 600,000 and give up their lower interest rate. So you're not seeing a lot of existing homes or foreclosures. So we really have a supply issue as much as anything. So throwing 25,000 at it may not be the best course, but we're going to talk about that in the bad section. But I like the fact that the provision, there's at least some sort of caveat that it's not here's 25 grand for everyone, just come get it, free money, which is always a bad thing. But I like the fact that there is going to be some sort of criteria to be able to get access to that 25,000. They're still going to have to hash out the details of repayment or how it works, or if you have to pay back the money, if you sell the home within a certain time frame. But right off the bat, one of the first things I saw was you have to have a 2-year positive rental history to be able to move up. And I think that's really a good way to incentivize that use or getting that money with that in that sense. The next thing I think is really crucial, and we're talking about it here, is the supply issue. So they're talking about removing and doing things for builders and incentivizing builders with tax benefits or tax incentives to build cheaper homes. But really, it's going to come down to the first expense for every builder, and that's the cost of the land. If you have an acre and it costs you $1 million to develop it, and you can only put 4 or 5 units on that based on the acreage or the size of the location, your starting point is already 250 grand or more. So then the home you have to build on that lot is going to be a lot more expensive. So if they're able to remove maybe either some density issues or be able to free up some land, that I think is going to be the starting point to make affordable home sections within the communities. Now, that's where in the West here, we have one of our biggest problems with affordable housing is simply the cost of the land. And so much of it is tied up in either state or federal trusts where they own the land. And also a lot of it is in very remote areas, of course, too. So you have to make sure you're strategically opening up some of these areas and just make it easier with the incentives to make it more affordable. Now, people will have this idea, oh, it'd be great to have affordable housing. I just don't want it in my backyard. I don't want 50 units right in a very tight space because you usually have more crime that has to go in that area. You just have more people kind of packed into one area. There can be issues with increased crime or increased traffic and all that by having it too dense. So there's definitely a balance, and people want to make sure their communities are livable and walkable and all those things. But if you don't start with the land and freeing up access to it, not have it take so long to release land with the federal or the state trust lands, then your starting point on the home is going to be started on that. I mean, labor costs, cost of wood and lumber and concrete, there's always going to be those issues there. But that's your first price when building a home is the cost of the land itself. She also talks about building 3 million new homes. That's pretty aggressive in a 4-year window that they're talking about. I think at the height of the real estate boom right before 08 crises with everything that was happening, I think it was 2.2 million, I think, during that time frame. So to get to 3 million in 3 years or 4 years while still having to remove some of this other stuff, that's pretty ambitious on top of just normal production. My assumption is that's 3 million new on top of existing homes. And that's a big number. That's going to be a big number to happen in 3 years. Usually home building kind of takes a ramp up. You've got to be able to kind of ramp things up, and you don't want to overdo it either. You don't want a builder building all of a sudden 100 homes and they can't get the buyers for it as well. So there's always a balance with real estate. that is kind of risk reward when it comes to projecting out 2 or 3 years on building subdivisions. I mean, builders are always watching that. How many spec homes they build versus waiting till they have a buyer, how many homes they start in a subdivision, because they also don't want to cut themselves off by building too much in one area and competing with other things that are happening there. So there's a lot that happens with real estate, but I think at least the bipartisan talk about being able to release some of the land, being more strategic and incentivizing builders, I think is actually helps as much as anything, because really our supply is probably our biggest driver of home prices. Now, everybody says it might be interest rates. Sure, that's definitely going to be a factor into it. But we went from double, I mean, rates incredibly doubled even more in a very short period of time, and we didn't see a massive home crash. In fact, if anything, that leveled it off, but we still saw appreciation because, again, there's just a limited number of supply, especially in the lower range. I mean, anything under median home prices in almost every county in the country, goes off the shelf really quickly because there's just so rare to even build things in that price range. Now, real estate's local. There's going to be different prices in different areas, but I think this is what I wanted to kind of stress, that there is some good things in here that I think do help solve the problem without just throwing more money at it. So speaking of throwing more money at it, let's look at the bad. All right, let's talk about the bad with this proposal. And the first one right off the bat is $25,000. That's a lot of money in a time where our budgets are already really tight, our deficit spending is out of control. Now, obviously the idea is to stimulate home construction, which will stimulate jobs, it'll stimulate a lot of things, but they always seem to emphasize the free money aspect of these proposals and not helping builders. And there's going to be people pushing back on the fact that why are you helping the big builders? They're already making a bunch of money. There's always going to be this anti big corporation that's going to come out of this type of thing when you start saying the incentives to have more homes being built. But you're also talking about a lot of money to increase demand at a time where the supply is the biggest issue. I think if you're able to increase that supply, you don't need necessarily some of these incentives for also increasing demand at the same time. In fact, I would say it increases demand more than the supply, because the demand can be added faster than the supply. You can have a $25,000 grant that pops up that is great, but you can't get to it and you can't have a home to be able to buy. So the ones that can get the grant and the limited inventory that's there is the ones that can get gobbled up, and the prices are going to go up. We saw this during the COVID. People were pricing their homes at 400,000. They were getting 450 and 500,000. So it wasn't like they were pricing out the home wrong. It wasn't like they were trying to be greedy and make a bunch of extra money. They were just getting offered a lot more for the home because people wanted to move to certain areas so much, or get out of certain areas, move to places that were open for business and places that were closed. And there was a lot of things that happened that just put a huge cramp on the supply that was available. Plus, it was harder to get the materials. I remember there was, plants that shut down that made the 2x4s or the sheetrock or the concrete, or getting it delivered. Or so the supply was so messed up because of also supply chain issues of even getting the homes built. So if all of a sudden you only had 10 homes to sell and you had 50 people wanting to buy, the ones that could afford more and offer more and pay more are the ones that got those houses. And that's why you saw such a big rise to these properties, on top of having such low interest rates that allowed their dollars to go further to be able to buy those homes. So as interest rates really went up, it did slow things down, but it didn't crash anything. Like, I remember everybody talking about, if they bump rates up to 8% or 7%, the whole real estate market's going to crash. And really, it's way more tied to supply and demand than it really is the interest rates. So by increasing demand without having the supply there first, I think you have to unveil some supply issues first. Then you're really going to just make everything kind of rise quickly at the same time. So I think that's a bad idea, to be able to just throw more money at it with these credits. Plus, I know people that have been saving up money, and then all of a sudden, people that have not been saving money and not trying to buy the house all of a sudden get this grant. So it de-incentivizes people to save for these down payments. So maybe instead of having these free money, so to speak, which is never free, somebody's got to pay for it, it's got to come from something. Maybe it's better to be able to increase programs where they need less money down, or be able to increase maybe mortgage insurance options, or increase incentives for a little better financing. But that also kicks up another bad. One of the things that everybody says was a leading cause of the 2008 crisis was some of these government incentives to ease lending, to make it easier for people that probably shouldn't get the loan to get the loan. uh, to go back a little bit as well, I remember this one person had this business, was a food truck. I think it was on TikTok. Maybe you've seen it. it was like flowing around like crazy, where she had worked her whole life, got this food truck, decided she was going to sell it, and she put a lot of time and effort into this. I think she was a veteran. All kinds of great stories about this person that kind of created their lemonade stand, created a food truck, did well with it, and decided to sell it, move on. Not sure if I ever heard why she was selling the truck. And the person that was coming to buy it had all this free money from the government to buy it. She's like, I never got any of that. Some of the student loans things, like, well, I never got these incentives to be able to do this, yet this person just gets this free stuff without kind of the effort it takes to be able to put into it. So I think it's bad when the government gives away free money, because I think it de-incentivizes certain things. It's already way too much spending on the federal government right now, that some of these things we just don't have the money for it. And we just don't want to incentivize these types of free money type programs. Now, would I rather see money going into the housing industry than other places the government spend money? Absolutely. Absolutely. But you're sitting here saying, okay, we're going to spend all this money on wars. We're going to spend all this money on the housing market. We're going to spend all this money. And now we got to raise your taxes and we're in deficits. It seems like, okay, wait a minute, don't spend all the money then. And then start doing better tracking with the money you are getting. I mean, we saw the Pentagon, we saw some of these places where they can't track billions of dollars that are just missing. And yet the solution is to tax more and throw more money at that system on top of just being so far behind. I think instead of creating some of these programs, I think it's like, get rid of the other ones, refunnel the money into these programs that we do want that are better. There's an old saying that says, one of the worst things you can ever hear is, I'm with the government and I'm here to help. So I try to think that it's better to be able to work on the programs that do exist, the 100% financing options, maybe limited down, other things there is better than just, here's 25,000 free money. Now, again, I don't know what the repayments are. Maybe there will be something where if you pay, sell the home or refinance or do something within a certain window, you've got to pay the money back. There may be some sort of strings attached, what there should be. There should be some guidelines on who earns it and who doesn't. And there's talks about everybody can get it, citizens or not. I mean, obviously that'll be played out with if this actually hits the ground, she actually wins the election. But I think these are some of the bad things with it. I just don't think we need to increase demand, especially on the low range. Like the people that are first-time home buyers, the people that need this kind of help are also the homes that are in the most limited supply and the hardest to build right now. So if we don't solve the supply issue, increasing the demand is not going to help the home prices. It's just not it's not how it works. And there you have it, the good and the bad with the Harrison housing proposal. Let me know what I got right, what I got wrong. Love to have comments with you, see what other things you're finding out about this as it develops out and as these proposals get kind of hitting the ground floor and as other people are reviewing them. But there's obviously going to be good and bad. There's going to be unintended consequences. There's going to be good intention with what they're trying to do. But I think it's always important to kind of look at both sides. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like, share, and comment below. Love to have you subscribe and be a part of this thing. And we'll see you on the next video. Have a wonderful day.